Would you rather have more square footage in the suburbs or a more compact space in the city? Today, I'm going to give you the information you need to make that call in every major city in the US. And it's been a while since I said viewer suggested topics are always welcome, but it's still true. And this one comes from Nicole Sanderson. Hey Ray, video topic idea for you. How much square footage would folks need to sacrifice to live car free in their local downtown core versus living in the suburbs with one car per adult? I do love a topic that seems simple on the surface, but raises all kinds of interesting questions once you start digging into it, and this fits the bill. So the obvious thing here is we're going to be looking at the delta between how much you pay per square foot for housing in a typical suburb and what you pay close into the core city. And generally, city rents are more expensive on a per square foot basis, but also the assumption we're going to make here is that living in a dense, walkable environment is going to let you rid yourself of the expense of car ownership. And that can play out differently for different people, but for the purposes of this video, I'm going to say the all-in cost of car ownership, meaning including capital costs and operating costs, is $1,000 a month, which is consistent with what our highly trustworthy government says. Then I'm going to say you're going to spend $250 a month on like a transit pass, maybe a bike, the occasional ride hail, higher rates of shoe depreciation, more delicious food because of all the additional calories you're going to be burning, walking and biking. What this basically boils down to is I'm going to assume you have an extra $750 a month in your housing budget if you move to the center of the city. The way I did this was I analyzed the 26 US metro areas over 2.5 million population. A bit arbitrary, but I really wanted to focus on places where the difference between the central city and the typical suburb is the greatest. And as metro areas get smaller, those differences tend to get less and less significant. So this isn't a top 10 list. I'm going to give you all 26 from worst to best. And the first couple probably won't be surprising, but from there on out, there are going to be a lot of curveballs. And the cities at the top of this list are literally all over the map. And I'll explain how I did this using the last place metro area in the US, New York, which is probably also the classic example of a place where people sacrifice space for urban amenities. So here's my approach. I wanted to find a middle-of-the-road suburb as the baseline to compare against. So what I did was look at the 5 largest suburbs by population in a metro area and choose the middle one of the 5 in terms of Zillow Home Value Index. So for New York, that's Elizabeth, New Jersey. I used my trusty dataset from Dwellsy to find the median monthly rent per square foot for all properties on the market and multiplied by 1,000 to get a representative 1,000 square foot rental, which you could think of as a decent sized 2-bedroom apartment or a detached bungalow. For Elizabeth, that gives me $2,680 a month as a baseline monthly housing expenditure. So for my urban neighborhood, I'm going to add my theoretical $750 a month savings from getting rid of my car. So I've got a housing budget of $3,430. To select my urban neighborhood, I went with the top rated one on Walk Score. Sometimes there's a tie, so I used transit and bike score as a tiebreaker, and I looked at neighborhood population if I needed another differentiator. To find the median rent per square foot, I used the most representative zip code for the neighborhood since that's how the Dwellsy data are organized. And for the West Village, that's $10.77 a square foot, by far the highest on this list. And that means you're going to go from 1,000 square feet in Elizabeth to 318 square feet in the West Village, which actually doesn't seem that outlandish for some reason, but there were in fact no studio apartments under 400 square feet available in the West Village, but there were plenty of 400 to 500 square foot studios in this building, listed anywhere from $3,800 to $5,400 a month. So the number of square feet you can afford, 318 in this case, is the performance measure I'm using for this list. But as we go through, give some thought to what you're giving up by leaving a particular suburb and what you're gaining by moving to a particular inner neighborhood. Like, I love the West Village and I'd probably make this move, but I could also probably live without a car in Elizabeth. So your mileage may vary. Okay, on to number 25, Boston, and I will move through the rest of this list much faster. Your run-of-the-mill suburb is Lynn, Massachusetts, where you'll pay around $2,600 for 1,000 square feet. The target neighborhood in Boston is the North End, walk score 99, but at a bit over $6 a square foot, you're going to be living in a 553 square foot apartment. Probably still worth it. 24, the Bay Area, and our typical suburb is Concord, which is East Bay. $2,800 for a representative 1,000 square feet. Maybe you could get something near the BART station? I'm kidding. All that space is reserved for parking and single-family residential. Our walkability champion in San Francisco is the Tenderloin. Walk score rating 100. I actually spent some time in the Tenderloin while I was there last year. It's gritty, which is maybe putting it kindly, and it's had that reputation for at least 150 years, probably deserved. But at the same time, it's a great urban neighborhood with amazing access to everything. Anyway, your Concord plus $750 budget will get you 654 square feet in the Tenderloin. 23, Tampa Bay. For our baseline, let's go east to Brandon, where you'll pay a little over $1,500 a month for 1,000 square feet in some of the most car-dependent sprawl you'll find anywhere. In Tampa itself, WalkScore is telling me it's Courier City, Oscawana, which exists within a zip code it shares with other high WalkScore close-in neighborhoods, which must be at a premium in Tampa because you're only going to be able to afford a bit over 700 square feet. 22, Puget Sound, and our middle-of-the-road suburb is Kent, where 1,000 square feet is going to run you north of $2,200 a month. Let's see what that plus $750 gets you in Seattle's most walkable neighborhood, Belltown. Almost 750 square feet, and I would take that trade any day of the week. 21, Chicagoland. Let's say you live in Aurora, Illinois. You're paying just under $2,000 a month for 1,000 square feet. Why are you doing this? Instead, let's go to the area that tops the Chicago neighborhood walk score rankings, the near north side, which I would argue is several neighborhoods, but if I use the most representative zip code, I'm getting 749 square feet for my budget, which I think is an absolute no-brainer, especially when you take a look at the actual locations and buildings from the data set. Just wow. 20, South Florida, and our baseline suburb is going to be Pembroke Pines. Very representative Florida suburban form, and you're going to be paying over $2,200 a month for absolute car dependence. Our walkability champion is literally downtown Miami, which is great. You can absolutely live car-free here, and with the $750 you save, you can trade down to 749 square feet. Actually, you can decide if that's trading down or not. 19, San Diego County. Your middle-of-the-pack suburb is Escondido, which honestly has its own charms, but probably very tough to do without a car. Nothing here is cheap. 1,000 square feet will run you $2,700, so let's see what that plus your car-free dividend will get you in San Diego's most walk-friendly neighborhood, the East Village. And honestly, the zip code here basically encompasses all of downtown, and the answer is 813 square feet. You know what? It's San Diego. What do you need indoor space for in the first place? 18, Southeast Michigan. The baseline suburb here is Sterling Heights, which looks absolutely dire, and what little rental inventory there is going for a median of $1.28 a square foot. Our urbanist wonderland in Detroit is called University in the Walk Score rankings, but I spent a lot of time in this location last year. I think we're calling it Midtown. The bike facilities are great. The Q-Line streetcar runs right down the middle. It's an area that's come a long way in a very short time, but also maybe higher rents than you'd expect, and you're going to end up with 825 square feet here. 17, the DMV. Our median suburb is Rockville, Maryland, where you're going to pay over $2,400 a month for 1,000 square feet of car-dependent purgatory. For your consideration, in DC, the U Street corridor is centered on a metro station that's served by the green and yellow lines. With your car-free budget, you can afford about 850 square feet. And in fact, the rentals in this huge multifamily structure right across the street from the metro station are coming in right at the median per square foot price. 16, let's look around Austin. The representative suburb is going to be Georgetown. You know, if you squint, you can kind of see the charming small towns these places used to be until they got swallowed whole. $1.25 a square foot in Georgetown, and if you want to live in Austin's purportedly most walkable neighborhood, West Campus, that plus your car-free dividend is going to get you almost 900 square feet. 15, our baseline suburb is going to be Roswell, Georgia. Really some of the most atrocious sprawl you're going to find anywhere in the US, and you'll pay $1.47 a square foot for the privilege of enduring it. Instead, why not take that and the $750 you'll save by going car-free and rent 939 square feet in Midtown Atlanta? Extremely walkable and extremely well transit connected. How is this even a choice? 14, Portland Metro, and let's say you're renting 1,000 square feet in Hillsborough. Due partly to the urban growth boundary, there actually aren't any terrible suburbs in Portland. Parts of Hillsborough are even downright urbanist, but it'll cost you almost $2,000 a month. You can take that $2K, add the $750 savings from ditching your car, and move to the top-ranked walkable neighborhood, the Pearl District, on the north side of downtown. You'll get 972 square feet at the median property, and the median property in the Pearl is pretty sweet. 13, the Metroplex. There are so many enormous suburbs here, but my middle-of-the-road one is Arlington. Pretty atrocious walk score and transit score of 0 because it literally just doesn't have transit, period. City of 400,000, 0 public transportation. So my advice, take your $1,500 a month, get rid of your car, and rent in Oak Lawn just north of downtown Dallas. You'll get almost 1,000 square feet, a walk score of 85, and public transit exists. 12, let's stay in Texas, and we're going to Greater Houston, where a typical suburb is something like League City. Again, the median rental priced around $1.50 a square foot. You can take that, plus your car-free bonus monthly savings, and live in the most walkable place in Houston, Montrose, which I spent a lot of time in a couple of years ago. It's great. It's served by the busiest bus route in the state, the 82 Westheimer. By the way, you are not obliged to rent 1,000 square feet. This is for illustrative purposes. You can take that extra savings and spend it on barbecue or whatever. 11, Greater Philly. Hard to judge suburbs here because most of them aren't incorporated cities, but I feel good sticking a pin in Norristown, where 1,000 square feet is going to run you just a hair under $2,000 a month. Philadelphia has some of the greatest central city fabric you'll see anywhere in the US. Walk Score flags Washington Square West as number 1. I don't have enough data to argue the point, but the median rent per square foot is going to get you 1,100 square feet. You make the call. This is around the point in the video where I would give you honorable and dishonorable mentions, but this week I'm just giving you the whole list. I don't know what to tell you. I was just in a completist mood. So this is meant to be a fun thought exercise, but I'm sure there are some people out there who would say, this is all well and good, but cities are for young, single people, and when you become a mature adult with a family, you move to the suburbs. And I would say this is just manifestly not true in the world's great cities, including New York, and it's never been true for me except for the year 2022 when I lived in Henderson, Nevada. I grew up in the city and I never left, and I assure you I am not a cool young single person, and all that probably explains why I am the way I am. Be afraid. Okay, a lot of the trade ups I've shown you are already insane, and from here on out they're just going to keep getting better. Let's go to the state of Maryland for number 10, and we'll start in Towson, where at the median you'll pay $1,820 a month for 1,000 square feet. Your top-ranked walkable neighborhood in the central city, Baltimore, Mount Vernon, walk score 98, and your car-free housing budget will get you 1,115 square feet. 9, this is going to be Greater Charlotte, but for the suburb, we're going to Rock Hill, South Carolina. $1.37 a square foot at the median, so I suggest you take that and your car-free dividend and head uptown to 4th Ward. I stayed in this neighborhood when I came to Charlotte a couple years ago. It's legit, and amazingly, the median rental is under $2 a square foot, so you can afford 1,128 square feet if you need that much space. Number 8, we're going mile high, and our suburb of choice is Westminster, Colorado. 1,000 square feet here will run you nearly 2,000 bucks. You're almost certainly going to be car dependent. There is a train station, but it's at the southern edge of the city. According to WalkScore, our Denver urbanist paradise is Capitol Hill, just south of downtown. Only $2.35 a square foot, so your housing plus transportation budget is going to get you 1,162 square feet. Number 7, this one is shocking to me. It's Central Florida, and your representative suburb is going to be Sanford. Only $1.50 a square foot at the median, but the walk score of 27 is probably being generous, and you're going to be putting a lot of miles on your car. So allow me to submit for your consideration Orlando's most walkable central neighborhood, South Eola, walk score 91, and the median rent per square foot in this whole central zip code is just $1.87. So you can get rid of your car and rent over 1,200 square feet. Choose wisely. Number 6 doesn't even make sense, but I'm a completist, so I had to include it. It's the Inland Empire, which one way to look at it is it's all suburbs and you can't escape car dependence. But sticking with the protocol for this video, our median suburb is Fontana, which is expensive because everything is expensive in Southern California, no matter how pedestrian hostile it is. $2.37 a square foot at the median, and the most walkable place in the ostensible central city, Riverside, is Arlington, which I think is the only urban neighborhood on this list that's nowhere near downtown, so that checks out. Anyway, you can afford over 1,200 square feet here if you ditch your car, but I bet you aren't going to ditch your car. Number 5, let's go back to Texas, and the suburb of choice is Schertz, which I was completely unfamiliar with until I researched this video, and which I'll probably forget about as soon as we're done here. $1,106 for 1,000 square feet, although I don't think you can pay me to live here. Is there anywhere in San Antonio you could actually live car-free? We're gonna try Tobin Hill on the north side of downtown. Median is only like $1.50 a square foot, so without a car, you could afford 1,228 square feet. So this one's a pretty easy call. For another one that blows my mind, you can live in a median 1,000 square foot unit in Bloomington, Minnesota for $1,561, which I guess is handy if you work at the Mall of America or out at the airport. Your urban alternative is the Whittier neighborhood just south of downtown Minneapolis. $1.77 a square foot at the median, so you can afford over 1,300 square feet and you can definitely ditch your car in a place like this. I'd probably just rent like 750 square feet and hit up Eat Street several times a month. 3, I think this one directly addresses the viewer who suggested the topic. It's the Valley of the Sun. There are just an incredible number of heinous suburbs to choose from here. And the middle of the pack is something like Chandler, Arizona, where you're going to pay $1.67 a square foot for the privilege of having to drive everywhere all the time. Urban alternatives in Phoenix, kind of slim pickings, but also improving pretty rapidly. We're going to the northeast edge of downtown, which WalkScore assures me is the most walkable. There's probably a lot of variation in rents here, but the median is going to get you 1,311 square feet. Our second most mind-blowing differential. Dorothy Parker said LA is 72 suburbs in search of a city. It's a pretty diverse group though. And my baseline is Santa Ana, which is crazy expensive per square foot for rentals. You're gonna pay $3,370 for 1,000 square feet. WalkScore says the most pedestrian-friendly part of LA is Central Hollywood, and I think that's fair. Only $2.98 a square foot. You heard that right. It's cheaper per square foot to live in a walkable neighborhood in LA than it is to live in a car-dependent suburb in Orange County. It is just strange that walkability is still so relatively undervalued in a city where the weather is so great all the time, and there are a ton of great neighborhoods here. And number 1 is actually number 1 by a mile. The representative suburb for this one is St. Charles, Missouri. Actually, I don't know how representative it is. St. Charles is a historic city in its own right with a charming downtown, but most of it does fit a Midwest suburban typology. $1.59 a square foot at the median. Not terrible, but my suggestion is sell your car and move to Benton Park West, south of downtown St. Louis. Median rent is $1.13 a square foot. With no car in your budget, you can afford over 2,000 square feet. It's just crazy stuff. I'm giving you a montage of properties that are in that $1.13 range. I know I'm going to get a bunch of comments along the lines of, what about schools and crime? I'm not trying to minimize that, but I just posit that for people who have choices, abandoning the city isn't the solution. It's actually the core of the problem. As if you needed one more reason to avoid car dependence, here's a recent news item that's been making the rounds. It turns out the US Border Patrol has been operating a secret program to monitor millions of drivers across the US looking for quote-unquote suspicious travel patterns. The program involves hiding license plate readers in roadside objects to identify passing vehicles, feeding all the plate numbers and associated location data into an algorithm, flagging driving patterns they don't like, and then pulling suspect drivers over for unrelated moving violations so they can do some aggressive questioning. It's actually a complex story with lots of interesting legal ramifications, and that's why choosing reliable, transparent news sources isn't just important, it's essential. This is what makes ground news so indispensable. I can see that over 150 outlets are covering this story, mostly coming from the center, with surprisingly few right-leaning sources covering the story. If I scroll down, I can see that left-leaning coverage includes a lot of concerns about privacy and the legality of surveilling citizens without any evidence of criminal activity. The few right-leaning outlets who have picked up on this story focus on the secrecy and constitutional concerns about widespread surveillance. Maybe this is a story where we're all actually on the same page. Being able to quickly compare and contrast coverage from different news platforms is why Ground News is my preferred news platform. I've partnered with them for this video because their app and website help me see the full picture, not just one version of it, by pulling in news from thousands of sources worldwide. I can compare coverage and get insight into political bias, reliability, and most importantly, see who owns the sources reporting the news I'm reading. I rely on Ground News because it gives me something that I don't get from any other media platform. Real transparency, meaning I'm not just informed, I'm seeing into how different media outlets go about trying to shape the narrative. I can't recommend it strongly enough. Ground News is completely subscriber funded, which means it doesn't rely on corporate influence to decide what you see. You can get the same plan I use, which is their unlimited access Vantage plan for 40% off when you subscribe through my link, ground.news/CityNerd. Click the link down in the description or use the QR code right here on screen to support an independent news platform that's working to make the media landscape more transparent. And that's all I've got. Thanks for joining today, and thanks as always to the patrons for your direct support. It's really the thing that makes it viable for me to do this full time. Keep the great topic suggestions coming. I'll be back with a new episode next week, and I'll see you then.